Rotten Tomatoes is an online review aggregator that collects reviews from a wide variety of critics for both movies and television, determines whether or not they're fresh or rotten, and then averages out the scores. It is one of the most popular websites on the internet. Some see it as a vital tool to help audiences decide whether or not a particular movie is worth spending their money on, while others see it as a nuisance that's destroying the film industry and film criticism in general. But how did it all get to this point? Well, I'm glad you asked, because today I'm going to answer that question. What is Rotten Tomatoes? Rotten Tomatoes was founded on August 12, 1998 by Sen Duan. He created the site as a way to centralize movie reviews from critics around the web in one convenient place. The concept of Rotten Tomatoes is simple. It collects reviews from a wide variety of critics, determines whether or not they're fresh or rotten, and then averages out the scores into a percentage score, with 3 in total: rotten, fresh, and certified fresh. The first film to be featured on Rotten Tomatoes was 1998's Your Friends and Neighbors, which received a 77% rating. Within a week of its launch, it had become an instant success, receiving mentions from Netscape, Yahoo, and USA Today. It also attracted 600 to 1,000 daily unique visitors, and it would only continue to grow larger. In fact, it had become so popular that by 2000, Duan, along with his fellow partners Patrick Lee and Stephen Wan, decided to pursue Rotten Tomatoes full-time. In a few short years, Rotten Tomato had become an icon in the online film community, and it wasn't long before outside forces came knocking. On June 29, 2004, IGN Entertainment announced they were acquiring Rotten Tomatoes for an undisclosed amount. A year later, IGN itself was bought by Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation for $650 million. The acquisition greatly expanded their reach, and by 2010 they were one of the 1,000 most visited websites on the internet. Current Television aired a Rotten Tomatoes TV show cleverly titled The Rotten Tomatoes Show from early 2009 until its cancellation in September 2010, where it was downgraded to a segment on another current show, Infomania. On January 4, 2010, the site was sold to Flixster, as IGN wanted to refocus on its core video game and male lifestyle properties. The combined entities touted a reach of 30 million unique visitors a month. The following year, Flixster was acquired by Warner Brothers. In February of last year, the site was sold yet again, this time to Fandango, which is owned by Comcast, NBC Universal. As part of the deal, Warner Brothers retained a 30% minority stake in Rotten Tomatoes, Flixster, and Fandango as part of the combined Fandango media. Rotten Tomatoes went through a lot of changes in those 12 years, but its core principles stayed the same. But that doesn't mean it's a perfect system, nor does it mean that everyone appreciates its existence. Rotten Tomatoes has come under a lot of fire over the years, most notably from infamous online film critic Armand White, who stated that it was an example of how the internet takes revenge on individual expression. He also criticized the site for dumping reviewers onto one website and assigning spurious percentage enthusiasm points to the discrete reviews, and he criticized it as a way to offer consensus as a substitute for assessment. DC fanboys had their own bone to pick with the site after Suicide Squad was critically panned with a dismal 27% rating. They believe Rotten Tomatoes was solely responsible for the poor critical reputation that DC films had gotten up until that point. All of this despite the fact that it's a review aggregator, not a review site. This fact did little to quell their anger. It was so fervent that they decided to create a petition on change.org demanding that the site be shut down because they believed it was biased against DC films, while subsequently being paid off by Marvel and Disney. This ultimately didn't end up going very far because, for lack of a better term, it was downright stupid. Brett Ratner, the director of such fine films like X-Men: The Last Stand and Hercules, criticized the site during a discussion at the Sun Valley Film Festival. Quote, "The worst thing we have in today's movie culture is Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's the destruction of our business. I have such respect and admiration for film criticism. When I was growing up, film criticism was a real art, and there was intellect that went into that. And you would read Pauline Kael's reviews or some others, and that doesn't exist anymore. Now it's about a number, a compounded number of how many positives versus negatives. Now it's about what's your Rotten Tomatoes score. And that's sad because the Rotten Tomatoes score was so low on Batman v Superman, I think it put a cloud over a movie that was incredibly successful. People don't realize what goes into making a movie like that. It's mind-blowing, it's just insane, it's hurting the business. It's getting people to not see a movie. In middle America, it's a low Rotten Tomatoes score, so I'm not going to see it because it must suck. But that number is an aggregate, and one that nobody can figure out exactly what it means, and it's not always correct. I've seen some great movies with really abysmal Rotten Tomatoes scores. What's sad is film criticism has disappeared. It's really sad," end quote. quote. For its part, Rotten Tomatoes made a statement defending itself, stating, quote, "At Rotten Tomatoes, we completely agree that film criticism is valuable and important, and we're making it easier than it has ever been for fans to access potentially hundreds of professional reviews for a given film or TV show in one place. The Tomato Meter score, which is the percentage of positive reviews published by professional critics, has become a useful decision-making tool for fans, but we believe it's just a starting point for them to begin discussing, debating, and sharing their own opinions," end quote. For better or for worse, Rotten Tomatoes has become increasingly important in the film industry. Some view it as a vital tool, while others see it as a nuisance that should be destroyed. But what do I think? I don't view Rotten Tomatoes to be the end-all, be-all for film criticism, because it absolutely isn't. Like I've said before, it's a review aggregator, not a review site. I mean, look, there have been some movies that I've really enjoyed that have poor Rotten Tomato scores. For example, Home Alone. Yeah, I know, shocking, right? It's a Christmas classic. 2000's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And hell, even American Ultra. Granted, it's not the best movie out there, but it's, for what it is, it's fine. But then there are some really, really good movies that have really high Rotten Tomatoes scores that I just couldn't get into. The prime example of this being Inception. I know this is going to shock a lot of people. It might even piss off a lot of people. But to be honest, I just couldn't get into it. And not because it's a bad film. It's not. It's a very competently made film. It's a very well made film. But it was just so confusing and mind-bending that I just couldn't enjoy it and I just couldn't get into it. And that has a high Rotten Tomatoes score. So just because a movie is really high on Rotten Tomatoes doesn't mean you might like it, or doesn't mean that it's automatically good, or just because a movie is bad on Rotten Tomatoes or is rotten doesn't mean it's automatically, terrible, right? And I think more importantly, you really have to form your own opinion. You can't let Rotten Tomatoes do that for you. All you can do is view it as a tool. Certainly you can use it as a tool, most definitely, but whether or not something is good or bad, you should be the deciding factor of that. You should determine that. You shouldn't let an arbitrary score determine that, in my opinion. If I really want to see a movie, regardless of the score, if I really want to see it, I'll go and see it. So that's just how I kind of look at it. And for the people that think that Rotten Tomatoes is destroying the film industry, to be honest with you, I find that to be largely overblown. Yeah, I know, it's not a perfect system, it has a lot of flaws, it's not perfect, but ironically, this sentiment sometimes comes from people that are just salty that their movies got low scores on Rotten Tomatoes. And by the way, if you want your movie to have a good score on Rotten Tomatoes, just simply make good movies, right? All it's there to do is provide the viewing audience with information on whether or not a movie is good or bad, whether or not they should spend their money on it. It's not this end-all be-all, and it's not trying to destroy the film industry. It's not destroying film criticism. All it does is collect reviews from other critics. That's literally all that it does. And that's how if you despise Rotten Tomatoes, if you think that it's cancer or whatever, I understand. And, for those of you who like it and understand what it's trying to do, I completely understand as well. Just, again, like I said before, you have to be the deciding factor. You can't let an arbitrary score do that for you. And if you want to see a particular movie, even if the Rotten Tomatoes score isn't that great, go and see it. Don't let that dissuade you. And that's really all you can do in stuff like this. Alright, look, I've said my piece, but I really want to know what you guys think about this. Do you like Rotten Tomatoes? Do you hate Rotten Tomatoes? Are you indifferent? Are you neutral? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I would really like to know this. So with all that being said, this is ThatKidDouglas, aka the Unhero, signing out. Deuces, stay frosty and keep it weird. Cue an outro sequence now. always found it weird that men are into My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. I mean, isn't that a cartoon for little girls? Men obviously can't like My Little Pony because it's a cartoon for little girls. I mean, come on now. And there's this fandom called Bronies, Brothers Who Love Ponies. It's a weird, yet strangely popular fandom. I mean, it's certainly an unexpectedly popular fandom, and one that would be perfect for a show like this. So, on the next episode, I'm going to talk about bronies and examine their history and where they came from and why they are who they are. Yeah, that's all I gotta say for that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go microwave a bagel and have sex with it. See ya!